Hello, I am Deb Coviello, the Drop-In CEO, and I'm so grateful as always that you've dropped in to experience this show where week after week I bring amazing guests onto the show who have some amazing stories, great insights, and sometimes they may inspire you because the work that I do is in service to the C-suite leader of today and tomorrow, navigate their challenges and opportunities with confidence. That's why we do this week after week. But today I am honored to share the mic with Chris Pienkowski, who, after a career of starting, running, and advising and turning around companies, Chris has chosen to focus on his passion for leadership and developing people by coaching CEOs, senior level executives at companies throughout the US and Canada. And it is because of that expertise and his unique insight, and he can go on about his backstory, so unique. I wanted to bring him onto the show. So, Chris, welcome and thank you for dropping in.
Thanks for having me, Deb. I'm looking forward to the show.
And as well. And my listeners do hear a lot of people that come on as performance coaches, executive leadership development, but it's it's because I really care about this work. There are so many of you out there, whether you're in the C-suite or trying to get to a place of impact, you may not have a support system. And so that's why this podcast exists, bringing experts out there that have keen insights to not only train the C suite leader to maybe do things a little bit differently, or if you are aspiring and moving up, what kind of leader do you want to be? And these are actionable tips that you can take and apply yourself. So, Chris, I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit to my audience and how did you arrive at this work that you're doing now?
Yeah, thank you. If anyone can't tell from my accent, I'm from Philadelphia, born and raised Philly guy. And I come from humble roots. I come from a blue collar, working class family. Grew up in the city, and my family and I now live outside the city, but still close to Philly. And what led me to where I am now is really Um, it's been a fun roller coaster, and I say that in the best light. I love roller coasters, but um, starting early in life, I really found this passion for leadership, and it was during my time in Boy Scouts. And when I was 14, I traveled to New Mexico to hike the Rocky Mountains. And prior to going there, I was elected senior patrol leader. So I actually led the expedition across 120 miles of the Rocky Mountains. Some of the people on that trip were older than me. I was probably one of the younger people on the trip, but I had that honor of leading, and it has stuck with me ever since. Started my first business when I was 16. And between the ages of 16 and 31, I started and ran 4 companies. During that time, got married, went to college. When I was 31, I made a transition into, I thought I was going into the corporate world, but it really turned out to be another 13 years of awesome experiences of leading turnarounds. And these turnarounds have been uh, in companies ranging from privately held $5 million a year to publicly traded organizations. And when I stepped out of my last turnaround in 2018, I did some reflection like, okay, what's next for me? And I realized that I came back to that passion of leadership. When I was in those turnaround roles, I never wanted to be in that company for too long. I came in for 2 reasons. Number one, I'm here to solve a business problem. If you didn't have a business problem, I wouldn't be here in the first place. And number two, I want to prepare the next person to work me out of a job and get me on to the next business problem to solve. So since 2018, I've been focused on helping people to be the best leaders that they can be.
So, I'm not sure if I picked this up when we had our discovery call, but when you drop in and you're a turnaround leader, what functional areas are your areas of expertise and what kind of problems have you solved?
I'm really, I'm very operational. So I will generally come in, and that's where I'm focused is, are our operations efficient? Are we utilizing our people, right? Our human resources to the best of their ability? Do we have the right people in the right seats of an organization? And then strategically, is the organization moving in the right direction? Do we have the right goals? Are we overselling ourselves? Are we underselling ourselves? Does what we offer in the marketplace align with the needs of the marketplace? So I really do kind of straddle the operation and the strategy side of stepping into a role like that. And that's what I think is one of my unique gifts, is that I'm able to kind of step back in 30,000 feet, look over the horizon and see where do we need to be, and then work backwards to put that put the wheels in motion in order for us to get there very methodically and very specific to our growth goals.
And so this is why I remember our conversation saying, "Oh, Chris is so much like me." I mean, we're doing very similar stuff, but from slightly different angles. But I could see us working together because it's one of those things. Sometimes it's a turnaround, but maybe not, maybe not 100% a turnaround, but there's some gap. There's either they're missing a leader, they lost a leader, there's a new customer requirement, there's an urgent customer issue, a new standard. There's some level of urgency for which we need to plug and play a particular myself drop in CEO during a
Mhm.
specific moment in time, but also they get with leadership development. And sometimes if we go on for another project, now let's step back. The dumpster fire is done. What is it we need to get healthy and sustainably grow? Then that comes the strategic work. And I come in from the quality side. Quality, a bit of operational excellence. That's in my pedigree. I've worked with plant managers and operations leader. We're usually tied at the hip. But have I actually done the operations? I've done a COO role. Interesting, tough, could do it, but would love knowing somebody else that I could say, let's bring Chris over here.
Yes.
Yeah, very interesting. And let's just go back a second. Boy Scouts.
Yep.
Life transforming for my kids. My husband was a scoutmaster. Actually, we started all, it was only 1 hour a week, right? We got pulled in to be in the Cub Scouts. Then my husband became Cub Master. I became committee chair. Then the boys move on to Boy Scouts. Mom doesn't have to go on camping trips anymore because I'm no longer a den leader. Dad gets to go away once a month. Woohoo! He becomes Scoutmaster. I become committee chair again. One gets Eagle. The other one didn't, but continued to be in service to our country, etc. So a great program. Reflections about that experience. I'm curious for you.
Um, I loved my time in the
Yeah.
Scouts. I started early as well, Cub Scouts, and all the way up the ladder. And it was something that for me, growing up in the city and then getting to go on camping trips once a month and get out in nature was a really different experience. And I still use so many of the skills that I learned in the Scouts today. Like, I'm 50 and I still know how to tie my knots. I have 3 teenage sons. We go camping, we do all the stuff. And but I often will look back and say, one of my greatest memories growing up was that trip to New Mexico. And first time ever being not only away from home for a long time, but being on the other side of the country and really being left to my own resources to figure out. And how do we get from point A to point B, 120 miles across the Rocky Mountains, and just get to meet people from all different walks of life who were on that same journey. So I loved being in the Scouts, and I live by the Scout motto. That has been really foundational to my own core principles, my core values.
All right, I appreciate you sidetracking here and going into that, but it is a great organization. The boys enjoyed it. My daughter even went into Girl Scouts and didn't really move too far because the one thing that was missing was, while they did teach a lot of soft skills, she didn't have the advantage of learning all those hard skills,
Mhm.
which are critical. I learned a lot and a lot of great things about that organization. But coming back over to leadership, I wonder about I just think about people and when people first notice their leadership. I also, at an early age, couldn't help myself but wanting to jump in and trying to solve problems and not being worried about what people thought of me. There's a problem to be solved. I'm here to solve it. So,
That's
just so
right.
you know, a message to people out there, if you have been a leader before, maybe in an environment that didn't appreciate, and so maybe you went small for a while and just become a member of the team, just think about what your passion is. If you are here that has a voice, can help people, and you want to be a leader, just put yourself out there or find the environment that really appreciates you. So, turnaround, are you still doing that work or now are you still more into the leadership development space?
Yeah, I'm really focused on the leadership development space. And I think that at some point in my career, like you just mentioned, I'm drawn to want to solve problems. It's part of my personality. It's just part of how I operate. But there was this point in time, and I can't quite put my finger on it, where I looked at my job as a leader is more to empower others to solve problems than me having to solve all the problems. And I think that's really why I'm so passionate about leadership development now, because I'm helping others to be great leaders. And that's, you can get so far trying to solve all the problems yourself, but by helping others, the old saying is a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you can help others to see the problem, identify solutions, and then execute on it, that's really where the leadership comes from. It's not you necessarily rolling up your sleeves, but it's empowering others to be a force multiplier.
I love that. And again, I talk about that. I had a pivotal moment late in my last corporate job. At some point, you're not the smartest person in the room, but they're smarter
That's right.
people. And how can you unleash their potential? And that's an important lesson of a person that maybe has been successful before in a smaller company, being the leader, doing all the work themselves, and people following behind. But it gets exhausting. And as the company grows or it gets more successful, you need to disperse that energy, that leadership know how, and help elevate others. So appreciate that. But I
Yeah. And
think,
one
yeah,
last thing
yeah,
I'll say on that,
yeah.
Deb, is that so many leaders have this wrong notion that they should be teaching people what to think as opposed to teaching people how to think. So when you really help people to change the way that they're approaching an issue, whether it's a business issue, a people issue, whatever, it's not teaching them what to think, but how to think. That's where the true power of leadership comes from.
Oh, probably the best soundbite so far of the show, but thank you, appreciate that. Now, you have a lot of business experience, you've worked with a lot of leaders, you're now, coaching some teams, but I think recently you have seen, a gap or an area for improvement when it comes to performance reviews, which I think you're quite passionate about. I'd love for you to share this because, oh my, I could go down a rabbit hole and talk about all the bad experiences I have had with this, and I don't want people to have bad experiences anymore. So, what say you on this topic?
Performance reviews are critical, but it's the way that they're approached that really helps people, whether it's the person being reviewed or the person doing the review. Too often, you have organizations, companies that will do an annual review. And in my opinion, annual review is probably the worst way to do it because you're trying to get people to think about what they did 11 months ago, a potential mistake that they made 11 months ago, or even a win. And that's just too long. So, my approach is number one, you should be having reviews with your people every 90 days. And those reviews aren't about beating them down about the mistakes that they've made during those 90 days. if a mistake happens, it needs to be addressed at the time that it happens so that you're able to move forward. The goal of a performance review is for you and your subordinate to sit down and look at what were the goals that were established for the past 90 days. How did we achieve those goals? Because proactively, we should be monitoring progress throughout those 90 days. And if it looks like we're getting off track, we need to correct so that we're achieving those goals. That's part of leadership, is guiding your people towards your goals. So the performance reviews should really be, okay, what did we learn in the past 90 days? What can we do better? What are the things that we should avoid? And now for the next 90 days, what are our next set of goals? Objective, measurable goals that are going to move us closer to our annual goals. So it really should be about development of skills. It should be about learning. It shouldn't be about harping on problems of the past, because you should be addressing those as they happen. Your 90-day performance reviews should really be about goal setting and how do we keep you and the organization on track for reaching our annual goals.
Really appreciate that, because and I like where you said we talk about development goals. I also, have thought about this, and I had met with my people monthly, just again as part of just regular one-on-one structure, and I had to discipline myself to not start about, okay, how's that project going, and talk about tactical details, because then you can go down a rabbit hole, and then you miss the opportunity for having a real conversation about personal development. And what I realized was, let's start the conversation around development. What challenges have you had within the area that you've been operating? Let's talk about those, because those become lessons learned, and
Mm,
then let's just talk about the strategy. Hey, we agreed on this initiative. Let's talk about this. Is there any way I can be of service? And then only then talk about the tactical details, because if you start the other way, you're never going to get to the personal development. And again, this is an opportunity to be in service, course correct, and this is about leadership develop. It's about leadership. It's not necessarily about the tactical work that you're doing.
that's right. And another thing that you said that I want to pull into that conversation is that as the leader, part of that 90-day review should be you asking the person that you're reviewing how you can better serve them. What can I be doing better to help you achieve your goals? And there's a framework that's called Feed Forward. It was developed by Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. He's like the godfather of executive coaching. And I use this all the time. Feed Forward is dynamic, future facing, and we're looking at, this is the issue now, how can we correct it going forward, as opposed to feedback. Like, so many people view the word feedback and immediately red flags go up, because we're about to talk about something that is stagnant and negative, versus feed forward. What can I do better to move the ball and be better at what I do? So when a leader says to the person that they're reviewing, give me one suggestion of something that I could do better in service of leading you, and then the only answer that they're allowed to give is thank you. So it's, hey, Deb, what's one thing that I could do better over the next 90 days to help lead you, to help you achieve your goals? You let me know, and I say thank you. I don't argue with you. I don't try to come up with different ways to spin it, because my job as a leader is to listen. We have two ears and one mouth for a reason. So tell
It's
me how
two
I can
way.
better service you, and now let's move forward.
So the performance review period becomes a two-way service
Absolutely.
conversation versus one way. This is what you did well. This is what you did bad. Yes, no, and it's. I really appreciate. I've never heard that insight before. Again, I always ask, what can I do better? But what can I be done in service to you? Performance reviews have to be two-way,
That's right.
even
It
though
should be
it's
a
not. Yeah.
conversation. People get so worked up around performance reviews and they get anxious about them. But there shouldn't be anxiety when it's seen as a positive. Performance reviews are about growth and they're about learning. So there should be nothing negative about that. If you have a good relationship, relationships are the foundation of your work, of leadership. So if you have that kind of dialogue with the people that you lead, if you're open, you're honest, then those conversations shouldn't be stressful at all. They should really be looked at as a positive. Hey, this is my time to get one-on-one with my leader, and I know that they're here to help me to be better. That's the bottom line of a performance review.
So, can I tell a quick story, a horror
Yeah.
story? Yeah, so I've always been a high performer. I've always gotten target or above target. I am used to getting those kinds of reviews. And there was one year I was just having a tough year, and I don't ever remember my leader, if you want to call him a leader, I mean, a smart person, amazing person, ever asking, "What can I do to help you?" It was more about how are you doing on the objectives. And we
Mm-hmm.
had those conversations, but I was having challenges. And performance review time came up, and they were hesitant to give it to me because I was sitting in the hospital next to my husband. And he
Okay.
asked me, "Do you want your review now or do you wait?" And I said, "Just let's just do it." And I got my head handed to me. And I kinda knew that I was off track in some areas, but it all rolled up with all the feedback at that one instance in time, and it was challenging, and it made things worse. Now, I realized I never wanted to feel that way again. I took all the feedback, I actioned on it and said, "Okay, I can do better with this, decision logic, time management, etcetera." But not once did they ever really ask me, "How can I support you? Is
Mm-hmm.
there any other learning opportunity? Is there a situation where they could observe me grow?" It's terrible, terrible experience. And I remember that. And that's why we're here today to help people learn new skills, to ask for feedback, to know how to give feedback, to make feedback an ongoing conversation.
Yep.
So I
It
got to
needs to be
go
an
ahead. Yeah.
ongoing conversation.
And it's so broken, but we're gonna fix this one listener at a time. So I got to ask you. I love people's headlines on their LinkedIn profile. You talk about it transform people into high impact leaders, leadership development coaching for growing American companies, success as a service. I have never heard that. You hear software as a service, project management as a service, success as a service. How'd you come up with that?
I actually am not the most creative person in the world, so I heard that somewhere else, and
Okay.
it wasn't related to coaching, but I thought that's exactly what I deliver. Because I help transform people into high impact leaders, it is the success that I'm helping them achieve through the service that I deliver. So I borrowed someone else's words, to be honest.
But steal shamelessly because why recreate if it works and it does help you? And your podcast, we never got into this. How long have you been podcasting and what's it about?
So I have a podcast. It's called Straight Talking Leadership, and I started it in 2021. It originally began as a YouTube channel, and it was really, I wanted to just share insights and leadership tips. And it has grown. It's now available on all podcast platforms, audio, video still goes up on YouTube. And now I interview people. So I have a mix of different segments on the show. Some of it is just me for 5 to 10 minutes talking about leadership topics. I have another segment that's called On Target, and that's where I answer other people's leadership questions. Because I always say that if you've got a question, then I guarantee that other people have the same or a similar question. So I'm willing to answer them and just put it out there for the masses. I do another episode that's called My Journey. That's the interviews, and I interview people ranging from C-suite executives to people that are just starting their leadership journey. And I've had some amazing guests in all different walks of life. So it's a passion project for me, but it ties back to this love of leadership. And I love it. I just get to meet different people, interesting people, and learn about their lives, because look, there's only so much leadership discussion that I can have, like as a face on a camera. But when it's interactive, I learn something from every episode that I do with a guest. And we're going on almost 200 episodes now. So plenty of content. And, I'm very down to earth. So, I don't fluff it. I just come in straight talking. That's why it's called that. And, most people, if they didn't know, if I was in a room having a conversation with somebody, I'm not using big words. I'm not trying to be the smartest person in the room. I like to be seen as kind of the everyday person. And I also happen to have a degree from one of the best business schools in the world. So when people find out that I graduated from the Wharton school, and I'm like, I never in a million years would have guessed that. Like, you seem like a smart dude, but you don't come across as this like stuffy Ivy Leaguer. And it's because that's not me. Like, I grew up on the streets of Philadelphia. So, I shoot the way that it is. And, sometimes I've got to bring out the mental horsepower, but no, I'm a down to earth dude.
And I appreciate that because, again, you can pay, you can listen to the gurus. The gurus have a lot of good things to say. And sometimes you say, oh, I wish I could be as smart as them. But I will tell you, I do the same thing. Yes, you try to get some pretty impressive people on the show, but I found some of the greatest conversations I have are from people that are up and coming that aren't, doing the podcast circuit. This podcast interview, and again, for listeners, thank you for continuing to listen to Chris and I just going back and forth. Um, humanity is such an important thing. Yes, we're in business. We try to raise our families. We try to make money. We do the best we can. But at the end of the day, it's about forming really good human connections, getting to know people, learning from each other, and also sharing this content with others. I do it for the same reason, not for the grandeur, but I always just love creating amazing content and getting to know people. So I wish you continued success on your podcast.
Thank you.
So, this has been a great conversation. I know you and I could talk about leadership for a long, long time, but I want to give you the floor one last time to share any last insights with my audience and maybe a way for people to get in touch with you because I know if people have really enjoyed your voice, you've got a great voice, and your insights. I would love for you, anybody out there, to connect with Chris. So, Chris, you have the floor one last time.
Thank you very much. So, Deb, the one thing that I want to share before I tell folks how to find me is that over the course of my career, I've identified a framework, and that's why I use the words high impact leaders, because I've created this framework called high impact leadership. And it has 5 principles. And I believe that those principles are what you need in order to really take your game to the next level. I'm going to just run through them really quick. But principle 1, communicate for clarity. Communication is the foundation of leadership. And that's understanding that communication is a two-way street. It's the way that we provide and receive information. So communicate for clarity, principle number 1. The second principle is simplify for effectiveness. So many people try to overcomplicate what they're doing, and it leads to less than stellar results. The best leaders look at a situation and they simplify. Do we really need 5 steps here, or could we get this done in 3 steps? So simplify for effectiveness. The third principle is prioritize and act. We find a lot of people, and I'm sure that you've seen this as well, Deb, people get into this analysis paralysis. I don't know where to go. I don't know what step to take. I need to be perfect and plan out all 100 steps in order to achieve a goal. No, let's prioritize the first step that we need to take and then iterate and learn along the way. But you need to take action. Leaders need to take action. The fourth principle is conviction and caring. The conviction part is knowing who you are, what your values are, what the standards are that you hold for yourself and for your organization, and then holding other people accountable. And the caring side is having that human relationship with the people that you lead. really having a genuine like urge to want to see them be the best they can be and helping them through challenging times. And then the fifth principle is decentralized decision making. It comes back to what we talked about earlier, understanding that you have a team for a reason, that you can't solve all the problems. So when you decentralize your decision making, you're actually empowering others to utilize their best talents in order to achieve those shared goals of the entire organization. You can put all five of these principles in place. You can chain them together. They interwork. You can use them separately, but they apply to business, personal, anywhere in life. You can apply these principles of high impact leadership. And the way that you can find out more about high impact leadership is you can go to straightarrowcoaching.com. That's my company. You can find me on LinkedIn at Chris Pienkowski. And I also put a lot of content up on Instagram. You can find I do a lot of reels and shorts. It's just 60 seconds, 90 seconds of me just talking about leadership. Also at Chris Pienkowski. All the social channels is just my name, all one word, keeping it easy, keeping it simple.
Chris, I absolutely love this conversation. I love the way you concisely deliver actionable tips. People should be able to go away, re-listen to what Chris just said and put it to action. But I encourage anybody out there, check out Chris's work and reach out to him and let them know how you found them through this podcast and just show how we can connect the dots. But Chris, I'm just grateful to start a conversation with you and continue these conversations and stay in touch with each other. But I do want to wish you well, much success. And again, thank you for dropping in on the show.
Thank you so much, Deb. This was a fantastic conversation. And, I don't want to use the word interview because on my podcast and in this one, when the conversation flows, I think that that's so much more beneficial for whoever's watching or listening. So this was a great conversation, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much, Chris.